the activities. We're going to be talking about communism. How can we best meet the threat of communist aggression? First of all, from Norway is Gunnar Aslan. Originally from Norway, but out in Palmerston, Pennsylvania in these last 2 weeks, he's become really a part of the school. Gunnar admitted to me that he even took the test with the German class, and he says he got the lowest mark. But I learned from somebody else that although he's not played basketball before he came to the United States, he helped out in a practice game and made 8 baskets for his team. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was just your 6'4" height that did it, Gunnar. I don't know. Next is Vangala Jayaram from India. Not unusual that he should be traveling at this early age. Ram's father was a peasant's son. He somehow, though, got himself in the employ of a Japanese merchant who took him to Japan and then to San Francisco, and before very long, Ram's father had himself a Ph.D. at Harvard. Ram has been for this past 2 weeks in the High School of Performing Arts. He says he's experimented not only with modern dance, but has also perfected his bunny hop. True? You're an expert now, aren't you, Ram? Over here is Johnny Antillon from the Philippines. Johnny's won every possible prize in his school back in the Philippines. For the last 2 weeks, he's been up at Fordham Prep. Although he already speaks more than 9 languages, he tells me he's been learning Greek and Latin at Fordham. Well, just 2 weeks of it anyway, Johnny. Johnny said just a moment ago when we were talking that the thing that really impressed him most about America is the fact that none of the houses here in this country have bars on their windows. The fourth student here with us tonight is Chin Tai Kim from Korea. Kim's hometown is in Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. His father's a Methodist minister, and because of the persecutions of Christians in Korea in early 45, he took his family to China, to Peking. Fortunately for the family then, they were not in Pyongyang when the war started. They had returned to South Korea, Busan, and then in Seoul, so the family is together. Kim has just come from an assembly, I think kind of a surprise assembly, at New Rochelle High School. The students, during the 2 weeks that Kim has been there, had raised $180 to support a Korean war orphan for 1 year. In addition, they gave the boys several other gifts that I know they'll prize when they go home. Well, now, how about this question of communism? What are your answers to the question of how do we best meet the threat of communist aggression? Kim?
I come from Korea. In our experience, we must meet force by force.
You agree, Johnny?
I don't agree. I'm from the Philippines, and in our experience, I believe that the best way to fight a communist is to make him a capitalist.
I am from Norway. I believe that it is wrong to use Soviet methods to suppress the communists.
How about you, Ram?
I am from India. The best way to resist communist aggression is to increase solidarity in the free world so that they don't pick us off one by one.
But Ram, in that case, if you really believe that solidarity in the free world against communism is the best way to fight communism, how then do you account for India's neutral stand?
Oh, yes, that's very interesting. India is neutral because India does not want to feel, India and incidentally many nations of Asia, that they belong to one of the 2 camps. Because if they feel that they belong to one of the 2 camps, they feel they have to fight. And one thing that the Asians would not like to do now is to fight.
Are they afraid to fight?
They are not prepared to fight. They are not willing to fight. And they know that the one thing that will destroy them now is to have to fight.
Precisely, they're not prepared to fight. Should they therefore not align themselves with some powerful Western country who can give them the means whereby they can be prepared to fight?
That will only inevitably bring them into the struggle. That means they express their willingness to fight by joining one of the 2 camps.
Don't you think it is much easier to prevent the struggle by making the democratic countries so strong that an aggression from the communist countries looks unprofitable?
Precisely. I believe that if India and every other country against communism were to join a sort of worldwide organization so that they could present to the Russians or to the communists that if they touch one member, the rest would come to its aid, then aggression would really seem very unprofitable.
But India feels that if India joins the American bloc or is with one of the 2 camps, whether it be the Russians or the Americans, then it only invites you to directly come in. Whereas if it stays out, it just doesn't have to come in. It is not a part of the program.
I have a question. What shall the Indian people do if India is aggressed by communism?
Well, if India, it will have to meet the aggression to the extent that it can. And it The other countries may help her to meet that aggression. If they don't, well, they don't. Then India has to face the aggression herself. If they do, as we helped you in South Korea, then it's all the better. We helped you in South Korea to meet aggression. We are against aggression, whether it be Western aggression or communist aggression.
What about the point you started with, Ram, the need for an Asian federation?
Yes, I think that the Asian Federation is the first step in this direction. If all the countries of Asia begin to feel this way, that they are separate and yet they have to meet aggression and communist aggression when it has to be met, then the best way is to follow the policy of neutrality as is followed by India.
Where are we getting on this idea of federation in Asia? You from the Philippines, some of your people have had a leading part in the idea. What's the future of it?
We believe that when countries in Asia can look upon Asian Federation as a proper step and divorce themselves from any feeling of extreme nationalism, then this federation will become prosperous and will prosper.
But where would such an Asian federation stand in the world conflict of today?
Naturally, the Asians want survival, not only for themselves, but for their friends in the free world. Therefore, if anybody is hurt in the Western world, the Asian Federation shall go to its aid, because the Asian Federation cannot defend Asia alone. Before it can defend Asia, it must also be prepared to defend the Western Hemisphere.
But, Johnny, let's be specific. The countries of Asia didn't even get together on their Korean policy. What are the practical possibilities of Asian federation?
As I told you, on theory, well, the practical possibility and the facts that exist today are these. Asians are jealous of each other, suspicious of each other, and they're not willing to join with each other.
Oh, no, I don't agree there. I think that a European federation, on the other hand, is far more utopian to think of. An Asian federation is not only inevitable, desirable, but practicable. And it is because all the countries of Asia have so much in common. They have all just become independent recently. And in fact, in the struggle for independence, they have combined. India helped Indonesia to become independent. And after becoming independent, they are all faced with identical problems, with problems of internal communism and with problems of a possible communist menace being so near Russia and China.
Ram, why do you say that European federation is far more utopian than Asian federation? Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think I would agree at all. I think that in almost all Western European countries, you find that the people are very afraid of the communist aggression, and they feel that the only proper thing to do is to unite their defenses to make such aggression unprofitable. And I haven't always seen such willingness to cooperate in Asia.
No.
What did you want to say? Wait a minute, Kim's turn.
Well, now in Asia, which has been occupied by European people or by Japanese people, I think nationalism is growing very rapidly. And I think Asian people aflame with nationalism are apt to be skeptical towards each other. That's true. But now when communist challenge is universal against all the national sovereignty of Asian people, I think it is very emergent for the Asian people to establish a fabric, no matter it is a Pacific Defense Pact or something else. I think it is very emergent to establish a fabric, but how to develop so intense nationalism to some form of internationalism? That is the question.
Yes,
And
I agree with you.
It is up to the tempo of the development of Asian people's outlook toward the world.
Yes, I agree with you there. And I think maybe I was a little unjust because Europe, most European countries became independent about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And it took them such a long time to get into a federation or to unite their defense.
Yes.
While most Asian countries are very young, and therefore I think it's much more difficult for them to see the necessity of such.
What happened?
Just a minute, Ram.
But Gunnar,
Just a minute, Kim.
you see, Kim, though you are an Asian, and I would like you seem to agree, and there I want to point out one thing, that Europe 100 years ago, when nationalism was rising in Italy, in Germany, and in France, and so on, is not the same as Asia now. The kind of nationalism that we have in Asia now is born out of imperialism. The kind of nationalism you had was different. It was not born out of imperialism. So how can you compare the two? And this nationalism will not in any way be an obstacle to Asian Federation, will only help it.
Do you agree with that, John?
I would say now that although it took Europe 100 years or so to do it, still Asians realize and they know that they do not have the 100 years with which to wait. They know that they must federate at once as soon as practicable.
Yes.
And why should they wait as long as Europe? They have the example of Europe to go by. What made Europe so long in uniting or in trying to unite was that they had to do this hit and miss method, while Asians can always look at the example of Europe. There is no reason except nationalism to prevent federation in Asia. And I do maintain that nationalism is trying to keep a country distinct, a distinct personality for that country, that this is what will prevent Asian federation.
I assume you're talking about an Asian federation that would be countries uniting in opposition or in defense of communist aggression. Of course, the UN is the worldwide body in which these regional federations can take part. But inevitably, we come to the question, as we talk about Asia, what's going to happen to communist China? And I'd like to know what you think about whether we should let China into the United Nations or not.
Well, up to 7 months ago, Chinese communists were killing Korean people and 16 nation soldiers in Korea. And the point is that can Red China come to the United Nations with unclean hands? Can Red China be the member of United Nations with the hand dripping in blood? That's the point.
That is a very fanatical
Now, wait
point.
a minute.
Fanatical
Wait a minute.
point.
Well, I think
No.
Johnny was first. Go ahead, John.
I just want to say, Kim, that the peoples of Asia recognize the morality of your stand, that it is indeed immoral and morally evil to admit Red China into the United Nations. However, I maintain that that we must be prepared to use Red China's desire for admission into the United Nations as a bargaining point. If in exchange for our admission, we can get the unity of Korea, the withdrawal from Indochina, the withdrawal from Malaya, the cessation of her subversive activities here and abroad,
Well, but
then I believe
think,
that would be sufficient trading for her to enter into Red China.
But I think the United Nations is an organization built on principles. You
Yes.
shouldn't bargain in the United Nations. Therefore, I think that it would not be possible to admit Red China before you have reached a final agreement in Korea.
Yes, I agree.
No, I don't
Precisely.
agree.
Now look,
You see,
Wait a minute, Johnny. Is your
Let me
answer?
answer.
All right, go
Johnny.
ahead and answer.
I just want to say that unless you're prepared to have an all-out war in Korea, then the only way of uniting it would be through negotiation. Now I ask you, when you come to the communist table, the negotiation table, what will you offer the communists in exchange for the unity of Korea?
all right, I'll answer you this. You said that to admit communist China into the United Nations is a moral evil. That's first of all wrong. And secondly, you said to admit communist China into the United Nations is expedient. I want to say that to
I didn't
admit...
say expedient. I just said morally evil.
Yes, but the second part of your statement was that it's good to admit it.
You have to
Anyway.
bargain with it.
Yes, you have to bargain. I think that by admitting them, you lose all bargaining. I mean, you lose any scope or any possibility of arriving at a decision. And as for the moral evil, I think the only basis on which Red China can come into the United Nations is a moral basis. You cannot keep 400 million people out of the United Nations. And the basis for their coming in is only moral and not expedient.
Now look, Ram, I didn't say that you had to let China come in and then bargain. I said bargain first. And if she meets our demands, then let her come in. That would be fair exchange.
No, I think morally you should let them come in. But from the point of view of
know.
expediency, it is not desirable.
Johnny, one of you said just a moment ago that you will never settle this question about China getting into the UN or not before we've settled the Korean question. I would like to know, since we've got Kim here and you and the rest of you, what you think the future is going to be in Korea. Let's say in the next 10 years, what do you foresee?
Well, from absolutely Korean point of view, I am impelled to say this way. We have only two alternatives to let our country divided into two parts or to fight for unification. Only two alternatives. But to let our country divided, that means death penalty to Korean people.
That means death penalty. You
Yes.
said? Yes.
Death penalty to Korean people. There are many reasons. The first reason, economically speaking, North Korea involves a great industrial part, and South Korea is only agricultural part. And the agricultural products are almost all consumed within Korea. So we have not got exports economically. So only when our country is unified, we can survive. That's the problem of to be or not to be. For
So
Korean
you
people.
say you'll either have to fight or
Yes.
remain divided, but remaining divided, as far as you're concerned, is not a possible alternative. You're next.
But do you think it is possible for two people or two countries to fight against each other to become one country?
But Korea is not two countries. It is one country.
Yes, but how
The
it is
division
then
of
possible
our
that
country
people
is
can't fight against each other?
absolutely artificial and arbitrary.
I think he means, don't you destroy a country by the act of half the country fighting against the other half of the country. Wouldn't that also destroy the country?
Yes, Kim, you've got to take into consideration a third alternative. I do recognize that Korea is one country, and to have it divided into two is an artificial division. Because the people of South Korea feel much closer to the people of North Korea than they feel to the Americans there or to the Indians there or to any other people fighting with them now. And therefore, this division of Korea is never a long-term arrangement. But you can decide the Korean issue by a plebiscite. Have a plebiscite in the whole of North and South Korea as one
I
country.
have a question.
How will it be
How
communist
can you
progress?
ensure the survival of Korean people? How can you ensure the survival of Korean people in the future without unification?
Yes, unify them, but give all of them a chance to decide their future. Give all the people of Korea, North Korea and South Korea.
But we know so well about the future. We can predict.
I would like to say one thing. You said that the plebiscite would be the ideal means of uniting this country.
Not of uniting, of solving the problem.
All right,
Of
solving the
deciding for
problem is
themselves.
unity. So it is uniting.
Yes.
Yes, of course. Therefore, the problem is this. South Korea is willing to hold a plebiscite, but North Korea under its communist masters is not willing to hold a plebiscite. Therefore, that alternative cannot be. And as Chinte said, there are only two alternatives. Unity through negotiation or unity through arms or force.
It is true that it is not simple to hold a plebiscite. That is why this alternative has all the more to be explored. And some auspices must be found under which this plebiscite can be held. Either a small country or a big country or an independent country or a neutral country or a European country or an Asian country. It has to be mutually decided.
That brings us right back to bargaining, Ram. In order to convince the communists to allow this plebiscite to be, what are you going to offer them, or what are you going to do to them, or what are you going to tell them?
Well, I would say that India could hold the plebiscite.
What would India offer?
Well, if it is mutually decided, why should India offer anything? If
Precisely.
mutually the South Koreans and the North Koreans agree to any third party, whether it be India or any party,
So how
then it
are
can
they
hold
going
the
to agree,
plebiscite.
therefore?
They should agree. Through
How should they?
negotiation.
Through negotiation. Therefore,
Well,
that is still the
Let me
second
talk about the
alternative.
political conference.
All right.
Well, I think
You
some-
mean the conference that's going to be held in Geneva?
well, any conference talks with the communists. Well, I think Indian people, I don't know about the Filipino attitude toward the conference, but as far as I know, of course, not only Korean people, but also all people in the free world want to solve international problems peacefully by talks. But that's the point. Can the communists be politely invited to withdraw of their own free will from the territory for which they fought for 3 years to retain? That's the point.
Certainly, they cannot be politely invited to withdraw. That's foolish. That's very clear.
So it's
However,
impossible.
that's right. However, if you could offer them something in exchange for their withdrawal, don't you think that it might perhaps be possible?
That's the base of a recognition of China to the United Nations.
That's right.
Yes, you must
That is the
recognize
basis.
But there is the problem of principle.
On principle, you must recognize it, not on expediency necessarily. That's what I say.
Principle of the United Nations.
Do you recognize that the communist government of China is the effective government of that people?
It is not the government of China. It is a bandit government. It has possession of China, but not the right to own China. There is a distinction between possession and ownership.
Well,
Why
if
should you
possess a thing,
recognize a
own it.
bandit's ownership over something he stole from you?
But suppose he owns it now, you recognize that he owns
He
it. You
doesn't
have to.
own it because he just grabbed it from you.
But at present he has it, so you better recognize that he has it.
No. Perhaps you can say that he has it. But when you approve a government is the government, you give it legal status and legal meaning.
Yes.
Now I ask, yes, right? Now I ask you, are you going to give legality to their banditry?
You are going to give legality to the fact that they are the effective government of the people, and that therefore those people can only be represented through that government and must be in any international body which claims to be international.
I would have agreed to that if it had been a couple of years ago, before China had intervened in South Korea. But I think that with the present situation, with China technically at war with the United Nations, it is impossible to admit Red China to this organization.
Do you think there are any parallels between Korea divided as she is today and Germany divided?
I think it is identical. Just as it is very artificial to have Germany divided into East Germany and West Germany. And because the people of West Germany are much closer to the people of East Germany, and therefore there again I suggest a plebiscite. The people of Germany should decide their future.
Yes, but I want to bring out one point. Although Korea is unwilling to remain divided, still the West Germans, although they're cut off from their eastern half, the West Germans are doing the best with what they have.
Yes, South Koreans are also doing the best, but they want to be united, don't they?
Would you give me the technical method how to give to Korean people the opportunity to decide?
That's right.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
How
That
to?
a mutual body has to be agreed upon. The North Koreans and the South Koreans must agree to some third party.
Well,
Which-
concretely speaking, that's the general election all over our
Yes,
country.
yes.
But if we hold general election all over Korea, it is too obvious that communists will lose because
Yes, then
majority
there
of-
should be an election. That's why there should be an election. If they lose, they lose.
But
That's
the
all.
point is that will communists accept?
They should accept. That's what. And that
They
is-
should accept.
And they will only
realize.
accept if you are prepared to negotiate with them. And they'll only negotiate if you have them in a body which negotiates, which is the United Nations. If you don't have them in the United Nations, they won't negotiate. And if they don't negotiate, you have to fight.
Certainly
If you're
not.
prepared to fight, then keep them out.
Now, I just
If you want to negotiate, keep them in.
You can negotiate with them even outside of the United Nations, you know. That is what they have been doing in Korea.
But isn't it much better to have them in the United Nations when
It
you have...
may be much better, but still you can negotiate with Red China outside of the United Nations. What I'm trying to point out is this. If you admit Red China to the United Nations, before you bargain with them, you lose anything that you might have to offer. So that you go to the negotiation table with no aces at all in your hand. Nothing to exchange for what you want from them. You see what I mean? So you have to negotiate with them and offer them as the terms of negotiation, as a price, or as a bait, you might say, that if they agree to the unification of Korea and the other conditions I set forth a while ago, then they're welcome to the United Nations. That is the condition sine qua non.
I want to come back to United Nations in just a minute to see what your own hopes and expectations of it are. But first, could we ask the specific question of what about Japan and rearming of Japan? Is there agreement in this group on what should be done about Japan, and if so, what? What do you think, Kim?
Well, why let the bygones be bygones, and why work out a new approach towards a good friendship with Japan and Korea? That's a good question. I think Korean people are completely ready to utter amen to this sentiment, but there is an accurate description of present situation. There are many, many complicated international problems between Korea and Japan. I will give some example.
Can you give us just one, because we're running short of time?
Yes, the most bitterest issue is the problem of a fishery. Japanese people are violating the peace line, so-called peace line proclaimed by a Korean government to protect our fishery. The proclamation of a peace line is based upon precedent example. For example, the President Truman declared a very similar declaration during the Second World War. But Japanese people are insisting that it is against international law.
So
That's
your point is
attested.
that they have to prove themselves now in their relationships with Korea. That could
Yes.
be a microcosm
No.
of their good intentions. Do you say then that Japan should be armed or not?
Well, I think
If you had to give a yes or no answer, what would you say?
I prefer answering no.
How about you, Johnny?
I prefer answering no, but for different reasons.
Mhm.
I believe that Japan has no reason not to commit aggression in the future. She has less land and more people to feed.
No.
Although she can increase the productivity of her land, still, there is a limit to which food can be produced. There is an optimum limit. In other words, two people can in 10 years have about, let us see now, 50 or 150 descendants, while land will just have a saturation point. It can go no further, while people will continue to increase. Therefore,
Let Ram have a turn.
Japan's past imperialism and her militarism has nothing to do with deciding this question. If you rearm Japan, you are rearming yourself. I think Japan is the gate to the free world.
no,
Yes,
no,
Gunnar.
no.
I-
Let Gunnar have a word.
I agree. I don't think that it is right to make minor differences determine such important problems. In the world of today, it is necessary that all democratic countries unite to prevent communist aggression. And this is the main issue. We have to let all minor issues go.
But that's what
But that is not a minor issue, Gunnar.
You
The
see,
army of Japan is a life and death issue to many
Yes.
Asians. It is not a minor
to
issue.
the whole
Gunnar.
world, in fact.
Besides, if you said that all the democratic countries should unite, I ask you, Is Japan a truly reliable democratic country?
If it is
No,
not
but
made
it is
one, it goes.
necessary for the defense of the reliable democratic country.
I agree with that. But
The
is
point is
Japan a
that-
democratic country to unite with?
Yes, Ken?
The point is that if Japanese rearmament is useful for the total benefit of the free world, why not rearm Japan? But is Japan qualified to be rearmed?
Yes,
Precisely.
of course it is.
Well, another one of these
Does
really
Japan
complex...
manifest morality? That's the question.
Certainly
That's
not.
the question.
Can I ask you from that to go back to the UN for just a minute, what your real hopes and expectations are? 30 seconds, please.
Well,
the
I
UN,
think
the UN is the culmination of human progress and is the first step towards a world federation. And as such, it must be perfectly supported by everyone.
Do you believe
And-
in the possibility of a world federation?
I think it is inevitable. It is the logical culmination of historical forces.
I believe that the people will and nations will soon come to realize that they cannot live apart from each other. And this conclusion will lead them to a world federation. I have every confidence that the United Nations will succeed, although when, I cannot say, but succeed it will.
Well, I'm afraid I'm a little more pessimistic, or because I prefer to call it realistic. But I think that the success of an organization like the United Nations is entirely dependent on the willingness of its members to cooperate.
We've got to stop on that word, cooperation. I'm sorry, Gunnar. I'm sorry, Johnny. But our time is up.